I guess I will tell you a bit of the experience that I have gone through in developing some technology, but always with a focus on, I guess, how it can help people bring about social change, have some kind of impact, and ideally improve people's life and the world that we live in. It was already introduced, so I already got an excellent introduction. I don't think I need to repeat any of these things. But I have been working on developing software for the last 15 years. I founded several projects that deal with whistleblowing. I worked for the Tor Project for several years, working on anti-censorship technology. At the moment, the main project I work on, which I guess will be what I will telling you a bit more about, and some of the lessons that I learned in building it, is the Open Observatory of Network Interference. That's a foundation based in Italy that measures internet censorship. Just to establish a little bit my street creds, I guess, in this crowd, I can say also that back in 2010 is when I first started to paying attention to cryptocurrency space. I will not talk too much about that, although I have been thinking about it in coming about this presentation, and I think some of the lessons learned can also be applied to this space as well. So what is UNI? What's the Open Observatory of Network Interference? So as I mentioned, it's this foundation that's based in Italy, and what we do is we measure the internet to be able to understand how things are blocked. So sometimes they will block around elections or during certain social or political instabilities, access to social media platforms. They might block access to independent news media sites. And what we have developed is a methodology to be able to collect empirical data on, that serves as evidence to demonstrate that, in fact, there was some restriction in place, limiting people's access to information, limiting people's access to certain content or certain sites in that country. And this problem, I guess, as Jaromil was hinting before, is actually harder to do than you would think, because, as was being said before, computers tend to not be as deterministic as we would like them to be. Being able to establish, especially internet networks, it's very hard to establish the causal link of what has determined a particular effect that you observe. So for example, in the case of the work that we do, we want to understand basically if somebody in the government ordered a particular ISP, you know, let's say Vodafone, to restrict access to, I don't know, a news website. But what we have available is, you know, we can't show up at the office of the ISP and say, give me evidence that you got a document. I mean, we can try, but most of the times they will not answer us. So what we are left with is looking at these metrics that we collect from the network, from the measurements that we carry out with the software that we build, and then based on that, coming up with some hypotheses of whether or not what we are observing is explainable through some kind of thing that is not the government intentionally ordering the ISP to implement that restriction. And so this is sort of, you know, it's a big topic. I think a whole, like, there is not enough time here to talk just about that, but you can read more about what we do on our website. Suffice to know is that we've been building this mobile and desktop application and building a whole ecosystem around understanding this kind of phenomenon on the internet. And I guess one thing that is also important to state, which we will get back to this a bit more throughout the presentation, is sort of what is the mission, what is that drives the work that we do at UNI. And I think this is in general something that is important for I guess projects that have some interest in doing something, let's say in the public good, or reaching some kind of societal or political change or impact, is like to try and be explicit and intentional about what your mission is, and also understanding how that applies to the work that you do. And in the case of Uni, how we sort of articulate, have reached to articulate our mission over the years, I mean, it took some time to reach this point, is like, what we do is we want to make a free and open internet by increasing the transparency of internet censorship around the world. That's basically what we do. So we want to shed light on how internet censorship is implemented around the world, and we believe that in doing so, we will determine an internet that is more free and open, that allows people to be able to access information with less restrictions and with less control. And so what I'm going to tell you about is basically some of the lessons learned in this journey over the past decade, from 2012 when I started the project to date, and I think some of the lessons learned can maybe apply to other contexts as well. And the thing I would like to start off with is really the genesis of Uni, in a way. So Uni started with this sort of idea that I had about what is it? At the time I was working for the Tor Project, I was doing a lot of work around understanding how Tor was being blocked around the world, and it was basically very ad hoc and impromptu, where we would reach out to people that where Tor wasn't working. We would share some scripts, some tools that they would run on their computer. They would send us back the data, we'd analyze the data, figure out what was going on, then reach out to them again and be like, hey, can you run this other thing? And then, there was a lot of like trial and error and iteration. And throughout this period, we basically assembled what I call a bag of scripts, like basically a set of different tools that we would have to pull out and throw at people when situations emerged, such that we could really understand what was happening on a particular network. And from there, the idea came of like, well, really what we are doing is that we're kind of building a unit test for the internet, right? So like what we're doing is we're making some hypotheses on how the internet should work in the form of test cases. So if you're familiar with the concept of unit tests in software development, it's the method through which you assert that a particular piece of software is functioning properly. So you will say, I expect the software to behave in a certain way, and you write a test that ensures that it is behaving in that way. And similarly, we wanted to do something like that for the internet. So it was kind of built around this modular framework where you could write these things that were called net tests that would basically make assertions on certain network properties, and based on that generate a report that was then the thing that we would analyze, and we would say, this property does not hold true. Therefore, it is likely an indication of some kind of restriction or some kind of censorship. And it was nice. Like, I think even looking back at it, I think it was a very nice idea. Like, at least conceptually, I mean, I still find it quite cool. I think it was nice. That said, we tried it, like, and we're rolling with this sort of idea for a while. But I guess it also had some issues. Like, for starters, we had this vision that people would be contributing a bunch of tests. We'd start having a giant community of people that would write tests that would get upstreamed, and people would, I don't know, write their own little module, plug it in. Maybe some of the modules would come back to us, and we could run it on other networks. But what we saw was that in reality, not really that many. We had a lot of even important tests that were contributed, but it wasn't really as much as we were expecting. The other thing was that we realized, I think, that the modularity and extensibility wasn't really that critical. Like, in the end, there's only so many things that you can test on a network. Like, it's not as necessary as in the case of software to have all this amount of modularity and extensibility. And by virtue, I think, of also focusing on these very, I would say, nerdy and geeky ways of writing tests, we ended up mostly attracting a predominantly technical community. And as a result, we weren't really seeing the kind of impact that we really wanted to see, right? And additionally to all of this, the whole system was pretty complex to maintain because we basically had created a testing framework around this with like a plugin system and all of this extra complexity around it. So just for reference, this is in the first, what is it, like, 4 years, let's say, of Uni. Like, we were getting measurements, we were covering some networks, but as you'll see in the charts later on, I mean, we're still talking about like millions of measurements per month, which, was not really the kind of coverage or insight that we were looking for. And basically what we understood is that we needed to somehow change our strategy. We somehow needed to maybe make a different type of compromise. And so really, it wasn't so important, we realized it wasn't so important to have that kind of modularity at the expense of getting bigger coverage. And so we decided to basically refocus everything on having fewer tests, having a system that was a little bit more simple. It wasn't as technically novel maybe from that perspective, but it made it actually easier for people, like real people, to actually install it and run it. And I just picked this was a research paper that was published around 2014 that compared several platforms that do internet measurement. And at the time, like Uni was listed as flexibility high because it had this kind of very modular framework for writing tests. But our coverage was like very low at the time. And we'll see in a second that, we compromised basically flexibility to some extent. So we made one step back in a way, in one dimension, but as a result, we made a step forward in the other. So like going back, we basically started building a mobile app. We started making our measurement library. We basically rewrote it in C++. We simplified it to a point where we could actually write it in C++ without going insane. And yeah, like basically from when we launched the mobile app, you can see, these numbers that were in the range here. We're now starting to see coverage of thousands of different networks and, in the order of tens of million measurements coming in every day. And so I guess, and another thing is that ultimately it's not really just about the numbers, because as I was mentioning before, our goal is not really, we don't care to measure the internet for the sake of measuring the internet or like publishing nice papers. Like really what we want is people to use the data to bring about some kind of change. And so thanks to this, we were also able to start engaging more with different communities and different digital rights organizations around the world to publish research that was able to document cases of censorship in places where otherwise it would have been very hard to tap in to the local technical community. And so, following that, we started collaborating, for example, with, whoa, what happened here? How do I go back? Let me go back. Yeah, there we go. With a great organization from Malaysia that works in all the Southeast Asia region that we still collaborate with today. And we started doing a series of reports looking at the state of internet censorship in, this was 2017, I think. We did Thailand, Myanmar, and Indonesia. Then we started working with some journalistic group in Egypt, where we published a report looking in depth at the restrictions in that country. And in general, what we realized here is that we were basically able to have more impact with less complexity. And so through doing this, of somehow, in a way, making a step back to go rather in a different dimension and having the confirmation that this change in strategy was in fact working, we understood that, we were basically on the right track. And on this note, I don't actually remember where this phrase comes from, like who articulated in such a nice way. But this is something that, I guess as like the ED of a foundation, I try to remind myself of this as often as I can, of like how, you're always going to have to make these kinds of decisions, right? Like that it is very important to think about how you strategically align your objectives in such a way where you know, you are putting to good use the limited resources you have and align them to what ultimately are everyone's limitless aspirations, right? Because we all would like to do all the things, but unfortunately we don't really have all the things now. And so if you know, you spread yourself too wide, you end up really not being able to maximize the impact that you would otherwise maybe be able to achieve. And another important, I guess, aspect to all of this is that we really started to realize how essential it was to have greater connection and greater, and a much tighter feedback loop with the communities that we were serving. And really understanding how it's not really about the technology. Like in the end, the technology is not that which drives change. Like what drives change is the needs that people have, the communities that you are serving, what problems they are facing. And if you are able to serve that with something that is significantly less complex, then great. Like that's what you should do. And really, you know, it's about asking the communities you serve what they want to achieve and how you can place yourself as some organization that builds technology or builds software so that you can facilitate the work that they are doing. Because, for example, with Uni, we really see ourselves as a technical partner. Like we are not, you know, there to do advocacy, to do policy making, to do, in the end, like if nobody is using our tool to do legal intervention, journalistic interventions, like the important work that brings about social change, like the tool is just collecting this data that sits there in our databases, and it's just going to rot at some point. And so, you know, really community participation is essential. Like not only because it's what drives impact, obviously, but also because it provides essential context of like what are the real challenges that people are facing all around the world. And really allows you to be able to address what are the actual needs. It's also essential in the case of, well, Uni, but I guess perhaps many of the projects you are also developing where there is this sort of privacy and security dimension to it as well, where it is essential that people have trust. You know, they need to trust the people that are developing the tool. Like, it's nice, I think, sometimes to think that, you know, just because you have something open source or you have something that is cryptographically proved, then, you know, trust comes naturally with that. But at the end of the day, what really builds trust is meeting people, is like seeing people, showing your face, like getting to know them, getting to understand what they need, getting to see if like what you are doing is in fact going in the direction of what they would want to see, and most importantly, listening to them. And lastly, obviously by building communities, you end up having a situation where you know, communities will be the best champion of your tool, you know, like it's, especially in our case where we need people all over the world to be collecting evidence of internet censorship. We cannot possibly be everywhere in the world as like a small nonprofit organization, you know? And so that's why it's so important. And you know, we ended up around 2016, I think, is when we started, and then you know, it got ramped up over the years, building what we call the partnership program, which now counts more than 50 NGOs all over the world, which basically function as this. Like they are organizations that do various kinds of interventions, whether it is on the advocacy side, policymaking side, journalistic interventions, in some cases also legal work, to make use of the data and also to make us improve the tools that we develop. And this is, for example, a picture from the last partner gathering we did in Malaysia with our Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Central Asia partners. And and really, like, once we have started ramping this up, we have started to see, you know, the outputs that we really wanted to see. So, you know, research reports that come from the use of the data, some of them also in collaboration with important international partners. We've seen our data getting used as part of supporting more academic research that is carried out completely independently from us. So it's just people that take our data, make use of it, and publish some investigation based on it. It's supporting advocacy intervention. So for example, we work a lot with Access Now, which has this Keep It On campaign to advocate for internet shutdowns, which has been cited, for example, in the United Nations Human Rights Council. And also legal cases. So there have been some instances in which some lawyers took the data that we generated and used it in a court case where they were able to challenge the legality of internet censorship and in some cases even be able to win it. So this, I think, was the one in Pakistan where as a result of this kind of legal intervention from the Islamabad Supreme Court, they were able to rule in favor of abolishing a particular type of legislation that made it possible to implement this kind of uncontrolled restriction. It also has led to integration inside of third-party projects that make use of our data and have it as part of their platforms. So, and obviously there's also the numbers, you know? So like, you may remember, I think we had the other slide, it was somewhere around here, but like, since we have started to ramp up all of our outreach and sort of community involvement efforts, we're now at a point where we're collecting, you know, many tens of millions of network measurements every day from basically every country in the world. And it's basically the largest data set that exists now on internet censorship worldwide. And so I guess what I will leave you with is I guess maybe some questions, you know? So I figured for this kind of community, like maybe one thing to ask yourself is like, you know, what is really like the mission and like the impact that you're trying to achieve, and does that align with the technology that you are building? Like, are the properties that you're building inside of your technology sort of leading to empowering people to do what they wish to do? And like really, like, are you solving the right technical problem? Like, is the specific property that you are implementing the right property to achieve the impact that you wish? And most importantly, really just involving communities and the people that you would like to serve. Yeah, that's basically it. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. So thank you very much.
Does it work? Yeah. Thanks for your presentation. Just a very quick question. Did any report that uses your data get published about censorship in Western countries, like European countries or the US or the UK?
Yeah. So we published actually, well, the last that we published was an academic paper at FOCI. You'll find it on FOCI 2024, which looked at the restrictions in Europe targeting Russian media sites. So maybe you know that Russia Today and Sputnik News, there was a sort of an order from the European, what was it, the European Commission, I think. They put out a decree where they said in Europe, access to sort of broadcasting of content from these Russia-owned broadcasting services should be restricted. It was very vague, like it didn't really prescribe exactly what should happen on the internet layer. And so we were interested in trying to understand how and to what extent this had been received by European countries. And yeah, we saw a lot of difference at the national level, where you would have both in terms of techniques through which the block was being implemented. Some were more effective, some were less effective. Some were not even trying to block access to them. One of the takeaways that I found quite interesting is that it seemed like there was better coordination at sort of the internet service provider layer than inside of the national layer, which I think in some way shows how I guess like corporations are more coordinated across boundaries than countries are coordinated inside of their own national boundaries. But yeah, that's like one of the latest research that was published on Western countries. We have done some other reports in the past looking at blocking of gambling sites and piracy-related sites. In general, those are the main categories of, we published one during the Catalonia referendum when they blocked access to all those referendum related sites. But in terms of news media, it's quite unprecedented what happened recently. Like it is, it's definitely, yeah, first time we saw it in Europe.
I have a question, like how you would define community for yourself? Because in this industry, let's say many people throw community when in reality it's just a Discord chat and people are not that bond knowing each other or they share a certain cultural aspect. And also maybe communities were diverted or washed out a bit by social media because they keep dropping the community aspect. Yeah. Like, or like a gaming culture, like you play a specific game, that's a community. But I think the communities you're specifically talking about are much more genuine or like organic. So how you would describe that community you were referring for and what sort of qualities they have to be defined as a community?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I guess it's people that share the same goals and the same ideals that we have, and that are sort of brought together by, in our case, the software that we develop, in that they use it as part of the work that they do, or as part of the topics they are interested in. In terms of how, like, I guess our community is made up of different, I mean, I don't want to say tiers, but like, let's say there's different levels of engagement. So, I would say the ones that are the most engaged are for sure our partners. So with our partners, as an example, when we establish a partnership, we sign an MOU with them, which basically defines what are the things that we support them in, and how what they are interested in doing thanks to our support, so that we can define some areas in which we can work on things together. But this is obviously something that's only possible if you are, let's say, a digital rights organization or a human rights organization. Like you need to be some kind of entity that is already doing this kind of work. Then we also have like people that are part of our community in the sense that they are contributors to our open source software. So we have people that will come to our code bases. They're interested in contributing, their knowledge, their time. Maybe they're interested in having an experiment as part of our experiments that we build, and so they pitch it as an idea, and then it's discussed, and then if it's something that we want to ship, we'll work with them to be able to integrate it. And then I guess there's also just people that are interested in, because they care about internet freedom, they care about free and open internet, and so they come to us just because it's an aggregation of people that have a similar shared vision of how the internet that we would want looks like. And as part of this, we organize, I think now bi-weekly community meetings, so that happen on our channels. So people come, we discuss, we have an agenda. We've started to organize also some, we also organize a lot of trainings. So we'll go to several conferences and organize workshops where people can come, learn about our tools. And yeah, like a lot of these kinds of things.
Then I will do one just for like, no, I was more interested, like, for example, since I'm from Ukraine, I see different internet shutdowns from all the sides related to the war. I was interested, like, how a person who is not a journalist and not from non-profit could benefit from this information. Like, so sort of like you're providing information for organizations, and then they sort of promote the fairness of the internet, stuff like that. But where in the pipeline or a food chain is the average internet user or a person?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, the thing is that the thing about our tools is that people can install it on their phone, right, or on their computer, and so really immediately what they can do is they can run our tests and they can check what things are blocked on their network in that moment in time. And this is something that they may not even necessarily be aware of. In some cases, it's also the case that people in a country suspect they are being affected by some form of restriction, and they don't know. Because sometimes it is, especially in places where, you know, you mentioned Ukraine. So let's say the network, the internet weather there at the moment is not exactly great. Like, you don't necessarily know if your inability to access a particular site or service is due to it being intentionally restricted, or if it is just because in general the network is performing poorly. And so in these kinds of circumstances, and we might not have, us or any journalist or anybody for that matter, might have even covered that topic. Like somebody might not have even published on it. And so what people that have these kinds of questions in mind can do is they can just go to our data set and see if data has already been collected on it. If it hasn't, they can collect it themselves and inspect it on their own directly. And they can answer this question. And it's, I don't know, I think it's quite empowering in the sense that it makes you understand really what is happening on your network. And it makes you understand, you know, that, because it is also a common thing that governments used to do, in that they would blame it on, you know, what I call internet weather, the fact that something is unavailable. They'll say, you know, it's because there was a cable cut, or it's because the internet is just performing poorly. But the moment that you start having the kind of data that we collect available, it means that this kind of plausible deniability is no longer possible. And it is something that, because our data set is made available as an open data set, because our tools are made available as free and open source tools, it means that we're not really even the gatekeepers of this information, you know? Not us, not our partners, not the journalists that use it. Like, all the data is entirely made available openly. We build these platforms that make it as easy as we can to inspect the data. I mean, I didn't show it here, but we have a platform called Uni Explorer, where you can go, you can build charts, you can pull up pages of particular countries, and you can see what's happening with respect to information controls in a specific region, in a specific country, without really, you know, we are not really, the vision that we see at some point is that if we have done our job well, maybe we won't even be necessary to be the ones that publish reports about this stuff, because pulling up your phone and opening our app will be as simple as pulling up a weather application, you know? It's like, how's the internet weather today? It's like cloudy with a chance of censorship, you know? So that's the sort of thing that I think we would want to achieve. I mean, we are not there yet, I think, a lot because there are some technical challenges that need to be overcome, in the sense that, as I was explaining before, like, there is this issue of determining the causal link. Because, you know, we are indirectly measuring through observations something that is an opaque sort of process that we have no insight into. Like we don't know if an ISP got an order or like what the government ordered ISPs to do. We just see what's happening on the network. But like with enough data collected and with some of the improvements that we are applying to our heuristics, we are going to soon get to a point where we will have some kind of system. I mean, we're working on a Bayesian network-based modeling of basically producing what effectively is a probability distribution of how likely something is to be unavailable due to censorship versus it being unavailable due to, let's say, natural reasons. And so through this, it will be, kind of like a weather report, like you see the percentage, you read it, and you're like, okay, I now know that it's 80% likely that this thing is blocked.
Just one comment. I understood that you're the opposite to misinformation in the sense that there's so many false information that is not censored, like on another spectrum, and it's kind of like there are many cases when there should be sort of censorship, and it would be interesting to see if there will be a discussion on what's the positive censorship for society and what's the negative in terms of the future of the internet or just a healthy relationship within the people and communities.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the necessary condition to be able to have this discussion, though, is having empirical, scientifically collected data on it. Because as long as we are only having a debate and a discussion that is based on hearsay and rumor and anecdotal evidence, which was the previous, let's say, state of the art, within quotes. Like people would maybe publish some reports here and there. Maybe there would be some articles that would come out saying this happened or that happened. But, I think in order to have this kind of discussion, you really need to have a comprehensive longitudinal data set that covers as much different places as possible. And that is backed by some methodology that can be also fact-checked and verified so that we can have a discussion of this sort of like what is the right threshold, like what is, maybe even open up the question of like, is it right for Europe to block access to Russia Today or Sputnik News? Or, where is it right for governments to intervene and restrict access to social media? Personally, I don't think it's ever right. But I think it's important to have this discussion, and the only way to have a discussion about this, I think, is really having the data to inform it.
Thank you, thank you.
Other questions?
Hello. I come from Chinese Hong Kong, so I'm interested in learning more about how ONI projects operate in China. Could you please provide some insight into its current schedule and whether there are any contributors from China involved in the project?
Yeah, so I mean, China is a very, very big can of worms in the sense that it is, it's definitely one of the most advanced internet censorship apparatuses in the world. Like, I think there are a few other places that have something at the level of sophistication of China. If you have some, I can say just broadly speaking. Like, broadly speaking, they use a variety of different techniques. One thing that I say about how internet censorship is implemented in China is that in some way they follow what I would call a defense in depth approach. Like, they are not satisfied with just implementing one line of defense to restrict access to content, but they will implement multiple overlapping methods, which make it significantly harder to circumvent any kind of restriction. So you see blocking happening at the DNS level, blocking looking at protocol level things, and doing also active measurements themselves to enumerate and identify sources and destinations of illicit traffic. they are also known to make use of some, I would say, pretty aggressive techniques in terms of restricting people's ability to access particular platforms. Like, just as an example, at some point, I mean, at this point was some years ago, there was this case of the Great Cannon, where they basically kind of made a lot of users become a botnet to attack GitHub and do a distributed denial of service attack using their censorship apparatus. And it is also a place where there are a lot of members of the technical community, like a lot of researchers, whose job is basically just that, to research on how to make the Great Firewall of China, as it is known, better and more effective at restricting access to content. And I guess another more like economical dimension is that I think China, to some extent, uses internet censorship also as an economic tool to provide advantage to their local companies at the expense of foreign companies. So, for example, in China, you have basically an alternative to most other Western services, you know, like with, you know, you have Weibo, you have WeChat, you have, you know, Alibaba, and all these other platforms that are direct competitors of things in the West, and the ones in the West are mostly restricted and blocked. But yeah, I don't know if you have like something more specific you would want to know about China, because it's, there's definitely a lot to say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much.